Hello, and welcome to another Mondays Live with Elle and Janus. We are happy to be doing a live on Facebook. So if you are watching us via Facebook or any of the other platforms, we thank you for joining us. Today we have a really exciting, I don't know if it's exciting or not, but it's definitely informative. Exciting may not be the right word because continuously we often have to have these serious conversations and they can be difficult to have. So we want to go ahead and have one of those serious conversations. But before we do, let me introduce myself to you if you are not familiar with me and our Mondays Live segments. So I am Elle Cole. I am from the blog cleverlychanging.com. It is a blog for families. I talk about finance, health and wellness, and also homeschooling. So we hope that you will join us and be educated, informed, and interact. Please engage with us, and we look forward to this conversation.
And hi, I'm Janus Adams. My website, janusadams.com. I am an author and historian, a journalist. And I host the NPR show and podcast, or public radio show and podcast, the Janus Adams Show. I am also the publisher of a series of children's books, the backpackskids.com series of books. And that to me is kind of those are the tasks of what one does. But especially as Elle speaks today about, this constant bombardment of just horrific headlines that we are going through that really rip at the fabric of everything. Then putting that in context, what I am about more and more, I used to say race and courage, but more and more, I am saying that what my work is about is history and healing, because that is what this country needs. And on a personal level, that is really what I think we're each craving. So welcome to Mondays Live with Elle and Janus. It is another Monday, but it is a new opportunity for us to have this conversation, and we hope you'll join us and send us little notes in the chat, and questions and just thoughts that you have. And as you do so, we will read them out, give them a shout out. And so here we go.
Yes, yes. So our topic that we wanted to start with today is the person we had on the cover, someone who has been in our conversations for weeks now. And I would love to say that we've made progress, but it seems like progress is hard to come by. And today we are talking about Breonna Taylor. Just last week, there was a hearing, and we found out that the officers are not going to be indicted for shooting and killing Breonna Taylor. She was a young woman who was in her apartment. The police came in the apartment. They did not announce themselves according to the reports that we initially received. There is a witness who has retracted and made several statements. Some statements say that the witness did not hear the officers announce
Or that they
themselves,
did hear. One
and
witness
some say that they did hear.
did, but most have said they did not.
Correct. So it has been, just unbelievable. So it was in the middle of the night. Breonna was sleeping, and the officers came into the apartment. And what we know now is that she was shot and killed. And so what we want to discuss is the charges that were brought were because not for all the neighbors, it was for shooting into the neighbor's apartment, but not all of the neighbors. It was for the neighbor who was white. And it's just really just kind of mind boggling that in 2020, we still would be having this sort of experience. And I think it's just troubling that we are facing a situation where justice doesn't even seem to be within reach for a person of color. And time again, that we see experiences like this, as heinous and unjustifiable as they seem, we often have a glimmer of hope that something will be done. But nothing is done. And so we really just wanted to have a conversation about what this means, how this looks, how it feels. And that's what brings us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for that setup. Um, I think, for those people who haven't had the time to do the reading or whatever, there is two phenomenal cover stories. One, the one that we featured for this, Oprah's magazine, and it should be said I think it's almost 15 years that Oprah has done her magazine, and each month she has been depicted on the cover. This is the first time that she has not been depicted on the cover. The person she put on the cover of her magazine is Breonna Taylor. And Vanity Fair magazine, that has long been associated with, East Side of New York style, values, has done a special issue, and on the cover of that magazine, this special edition was guest edited by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and using a range of African American talent to tell multiple sides of this story, because it's not just the story about one woman being killed in her bed by police. That would be bad enough, but it is the fact that it is emblematic of centuries of stories of atrocities that do not get addressed, no one is held accountable for. That's why it was important. But it was on the cover of Vanity Fair, and they gave Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old young woman, just at the beginning of her, flowering as an adult, moving into her life. They gave her an amazing treatment. She is depicted in a painting done by Amy Sherald, who is the woman that Michelle Obama chose to do her official White House portrait as First Lady. That is the treatment, and that is the respect due this young woman. Earlier this year, we've been talking about the George Floyd demonstrations. Now we're talking about the Breonna Taylor demonstrations. These are the ongoing Black Lives Must Matter demonstrations. And, the details of it, I think, are just so important. The police are saying that they did this huge multiple rounds of shots in the middle of the night into someone's home because the person shot back. These are people who are in their bed. Her boyfriend had a licensed gun. This is a stand your ground state, and a state that loves to tout the right to carry guns and the right to self-defense. He heard somebody breaking down his door, and he did not shoot wildly at the door. He shot down, and indeed the one officer who was hit was shot in the leg. The police, knowing that they have now, plainclothes police, knowing that they have now attacked and stormed someone's door in the middle of the night, I don't care what kind of warrant they have or they think they have. And that was their excuse. We had a no-knock warrant. Those no-knock warrants have now been outlawed in Louisville where this took place, and they should be outlawed every place because they are really a license to kill without discretion. And that's the problem. It is the lack of accountability. The police who do these things do not get accountable. The circumstances under which they do, Derek Chauvin is the anomaly that he has been charged with the murder of George Floyd. But on average, we have one shooting of an unarmed Black person per week in the United States, and only one police officer in recent memory that we can think of, Derek Chauvin, is being held accountable. The others, in the case of Breonna Taylor, the city of Louisville is paying or will pay $12 million in restitution of a suit. It will not bring her back. It will not heal her family, nor will it hold the police officers who were so indiscriminate, except racially indiscriminate, accountable. They will not pay $1. They will not lose their jobs. They will not be sentenced. They will not be even charged. They will not lose their pensions. It will cost them nothing to have done this huge spray of bullets into the home of a sleeping person. It will cost them nothing, and therefore it will happen again. And that is the crime of this. Every time somebody doubles down on these police shootings, it means that it is a time that they have refused to look at what is happening and say, we must make a policy change, we must make a decision. That, to me, is the huge tragedy. You mentioned the neighbors. 3 apartments were shot into. Breonna Taylor's, where she was murdered in her bed. A next door neighbor who was Black, where it was found that they shot through the draperies and, the window and whatever. They were clearly, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was under control as a gun carrier. He shot down, and only one person was hit in the leg. The police were totally out of control, shooting everywhere. 3 apartments were shot into. The second one Breonna Taylor's was the first one. The second one was the apartment of a Black person in that apartment complex. That shooting has not been charged. The only one that was charged was the shooting into the apartment of a white person, and it was really a very minor charge next to what really took place that night. That night that this woman was killed, and that she was alive when they got to her, but they let her body go without any medical treatment. So she might have been saved. I don't know that she would have been saved with the kinds of bullet wounds she suffered, but she might have been. And it's important to know she was a corrections officer. So technically, this was a woman on the same side they are. And they still murdered her in her bed.
I think it's important for people to, if they're interested in learning more of the story, her mother tells her experience going to the house and basically being given the runaround.
Yep.
When she arrived, her
go
mother
here, go there, go
right,
here.
right, and she
Truly,
was actually in the hospital,
the runaround,
thinking her daughter was in the hospital for hours before a person on the hospital staff saying she never arrived. And I think it's just, this is one of those experiences where people have to understand the person that the police officers were going to the home to apprehend was not even there. The person was already in custody. I mean, so even when people try to justify this, there is no justification. Breonna was not the intended target. According to the warrant,
It
there was
wasn't.
no warrant for Breonna. And so, no matter how you look at it,
Or her
there
boyfriend.
is absolutely no justification for this. And how can you trust a system? How can you trust a police department that does not have your best interest in mind? So the police department is made to protect the community. That is the understanding that we're told as a community. But when we see instances like this, it's like, well, who are they protecting? They didn't announce themselves. They weren't even coming for Breonna. So here we have a young woman who is dead, and absolutely no restitution is being brought upon her situation. And I think this is a time where, I know for me as a Black female, it seems like in in many cases we see Black women being harmed, and the outrage is often different than the outrage is for unarmed Black men. And I think that's something that really is extra disturbing about this case because, again, Breonna was not the target. There was no warrant for her arrest. She had done nothing wrong. And we have a woman who is dead. And it's like the system, the legal system, is dismissing her life. And that is why everyone who learns about this case is outraged, because it is so unsettling. Breonna could be any of us, not just us women of color. She could be truly anyone. And so it's like you have to speak out against injustice when it happens. And so that is why we chose to bring light on this case. And I think we cannot allow this to be forgotten, because once again, it could be anyone. Anyone could be shot by police in their home with a no-knock warrant, because it is simply that outrageous. And she should not have died. That is why her family did win their case, and $12 million. Again, that is not, her life was worth more than every penny of that. And I'm sure her family would would rather trade that money for her any day.
I think when people put that number up, or any number up, you know, what kind of society is this that you think you can buy a life like that? Would that be good enough for you? Would you say, oh yeah, they killed my sister, but I got $12 million? And if you would, then I think we have to really look into you, because you are a danger to the rest of us, that you are thinking that something like that is okay. It is not okay. And the idea that we have not just that $12 million, but in New York City, another huge sum was paid. Eric Garner's family had to be paid. All over the country, people are going through this. Their families are, this is an epidemic. This is an epidemic in this society. And as I say, the refusal to really deal with it is the plan to continue it.
Right. And I want to also just make note of the fact that the people who are paying these settlements, so there was also a settlement in Baltimore, Maryland, when Freddie Gray was killed in police custody. And
Mm-hmm.
the people who are paying it, who are fitting the bill for this, is us. It's the taxpayers. It is not the police department. It is us. And I think at some point, we all have to be outraged to know that our hard earned money that we work hard for is being used for these type of situations where the people, there needs to be call to action. There needs to be some changes that take place. We need to see policy changes on every level. And we need to see police departments being held accountable. And I think it's an accountability problem. And I know I'm tired of fitting the bill, as I'm sure you are as well.
Right now, we have cities that are going to have to lay off people because of the pandemic, New York City being one of them, where they're talking about, quote, furloughs. Um, I don't remember the amount of money that was paid to Eric Garner's family, but they're only one of the families. It's not as though that's the only time it's happened. This is happening all the time. Um, think of the number of people whose daily living could have been saved by that. And once again, you know, who gets hurt? Who are the city workers? Who are those are the same kinds of first responders who are for the city, who keep these cities going, who are a lot of them civil service employees are people of color. So it's another rape and ripoff. A guest on my show has been uh, he is currently still New York City councilman, excuse me, New York City councilman Richie Torres, and Richie Torres is the youngest person ever elected to the New York City Council in the history of the city. He has just been elected to Congress, and his victory was so definitive that he was certified August 5th already. So he is the newest elected congressman from New York City. And he, on my show, he was talking about public housing and the importance of public housing. One quick aside, also in the Breonna Taylor story, people like to conflate why these things happen, and they will say, well, you know, if they live in the ghetto, it's a poor community, and, you know, police are afraid. That is a crock when you hear it, but it also was not the story of Breonna Taylor. It wasn't her story. She was living in an apartment complex where she has a white next door neighbor. He is about to be given some kind of accountability. She is not. But back to Richie Torres and this issue that we're talking about with city employees and who they are. I asked him, you know, well, why is public housing so important? He said, well, because the people by and large who work in who keep the city going, who have New York City paychecks, the civil service workforce, are by and large people of color. And the payment that they get for being civil service employees, even those who have degrees or whatever, basically is not enough to afford competitive rents in New York City. Right now, the rent for a family of four in non-public housing is between $2,500 and $3,000 a month, which means for a family of four. So basically that's a two-bedroom apartment, which means if in old rubrics, we would say that your monthly rent should not exceed 4 times your annual salary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, $3,000 a month means you would have to earn $12,000 a month to be in that. So you have to be earning $144,000 a year. Believe me, the New York City employees are not earning $144,000 a year. Even the teachers with doctorates aren't earning that. So that is the need for public housing. These are the kinds of things that we have to think through. So when we start talking about these settlements that have to be paid in restitution, and they should be paid in restitution, more importantly, they should stop murdering people. But when we say who gets hurt, not only do we have this disproportionate number of Black and brown people being murdered, but we also then have, when these city budgets are cut and all of this, a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people who are being hurt by those tax shortages, by tax breaks, all this kind of stuff. That's who is hurt there too. We have to really, Maya Angelou said it's time for thinking people to think. She said that in the wake of 9/11, and it is an important statement. But it's also time for thinking people to share the facts that we know. There are some people who could care less about facts. We know, we see the manifestation of that. But until Richie Torres and I had that conversation, I had not had a reason to think about public housing, because the propaganda on public housing was welfare queens. But I knew that wasn't so. I knew that was nonsense. But I had no idea that what we're talking about is even police officers who live within the city confines.
Right.
In order to pay $2,500 to $3,000 a month, even at the 3 times your rent for your annual salary, that would make it $12,000 a month. But it would make it, it would make it that the person would have to earn $9,000 a month, which means that the person 9 times 12 would have to earn $108,000 a year. City employees are not paid $108,000 a year. So,
Right. So we have only 3 minutes left, and I know that we had some other topics that we just wanted to touch on.
let's do a lightning round.
Okay.
So, what are you thinking about the new Supreme Court pick? Okay. What are you thinking about the presidential debate?
When is the presidential debates?
Tomorrow
night. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing about it. I mean, to watching it. I always like to see it in the moment. I think this is a time for Joe Biden to really shine, and I think we need to see his strength. So the debates that he did with the Democrats, he didn't necessarily shine in every debate. And so I think now that he is the nominee, he feels that confidence that we didn't see in the Democratic debate. So I'm really looking at him to stand and just be a wise figure that we need, someone who brings unity and authority and knowledge, all those things that I think our society and communities are craving. So I'm really looking for him to shine in that regard. And I think that for such a time as this, like, we need the debates to be reassuring that we're going to go into a better state, because with this pandemic, people are just discouraged. And I think we need something to kind of shift our thinking and give us hope. And I think the debates can do that.
And what do you think of Trump's taxes that he paid $750?
I wasn't surprised.
By the way, the public employees that we're talking about paid much more than $750 out of their meager salaries.
Yes, that didn't surprise me one bit. I knew that was going to be the case when the knowledge about his taxes were released. So, and I want to just say, if you read those documents and the reports that came out, it also shares what Joe Biden paid in contrast, which was a very large amount. It was a large sum. And I think, when Trump was running for office, often his campaign would borrow money from him. Like, so he would say, "Oh, I'm going to pay it." Like he was taking his own money to pay it. But what people weren't realizing, he was saying, "I'm allowing my campaign to borrow this money from me." So in essence, he wanted to be paid back. And I think people were dismissing that fact. So for him, this has always been a business. And I think people are, I would love to say his fan base, they were opening their eyes and now they see, but I know that not to be the case because what the report that was released is in line with the man that we've come to really know. So if someone was surprised, I'm surprised they were surprised.
Exactly. I'm surprised you're surprised. For me, the tax thing, anybody who's lived in New York who's wanted to know knows that there has always been something shady about Donald Trump. Yeah, absolutely, always. The constant bankruptcies, even the bankers had said that the reason they kept lending him money was because it was going to cost them more if he failed. So they kept propping him up. I'd love for us all to have that privilege. And we don't.
Right.
So the bankers kept, they were afraid that his whole thing would come tumbling down and then they would be in for even more money. That is something, you know, if you're too big to fail, then you're too big to succeed. And he has been. He has not succeeded. And once again, when we bring it back to who benefits and who gets hurt, all these bankruptcies that Trump has put through, it is the average person, the subcontractors who were stiffed.
Right.
And Michael Cohen's role was to go to those people, and maybe others other than Michael Cohen too, but that was one of the things that he did for Trump. He would go to those people and say, look, either you take 10 cents on the dollar or you take nothing. Or they go and they say, either you take half or in bankruptcy, you're only going to get 10 cents on the dollar. But he contracted those people knowing that he did not have the money and that he had no intention of following through on those contracts. And so when you, all right, I can't be inside his head. So I can't say he had no intention. But I will say, but he had a history of when
Yeah.
other people, he placed other people in this situation. He had a history of just saying, well, I'm declaring bankruptcy and they'll get a pittance. So how many of these projects did he launch getting in this huge amount of money from banks and other resources, banks who therefore did not apply that money to other people who might have been more worthy? But how much of that did he not only not pay taxes on, but how much of that money was made on the backs of people who he ultimately was not going to pay and who themselves then ended up struggling? That's the question. It is time for thinking people to think. Maybe you like his bravado. Maybe you like the idea that he, is insulting to women and Black people. Maybe you love that. But do you really love stiffing yourself and other small businesses who would otherwise be paying you?
I think we should end on that food for thought. I think that is what people have to ask themselves. And I want to also say that for me, it's like, what lesson are we teaching the next generation? These are the examples that are going before them. And to me, that is the troubling thing. Are we making this normal? Because I don't think it should be made normal. But in essence, for people to have a blind eye at what has been taking place, they're telling our children that this is okay to live this way. And I don't think that's something that we should be teaching the generation before us.
I don't think they care what they're telling our children, but I would even ask what they're telling their children. Because even if they see their children as being future masters of the universe, even if they see that, most of those masters of the universe, it was only the one of those masters of the universe who was able to built banks of millions, but the rest were not. So, what are even you who think you're in a better shape because your finances are okay in the midst of all of this? Come on, people. Come on, people. You know, for this week of Mondays Live with Elle and Janus, I'm Janus Adams of janusadams.com. I wish you a wonderful week. I wish you blue skies and better days, and I wish you the opportunity that we'll be able to come back and talk to you again next week.
Yes. So I am Elle Cole from cleverlychanging.com, and I hope you tune in next Monday. All right. Bye now.
Bye now.